Henry Anderson left $12,000 on the dresser in his bedroom. It was not a mistake. It was not carelessness. And it was definitely not something he had forgotten. It was a trap. A quiet, deliberate test designed with precision and patience. For 15 years, Henry had been running the same experiment inside his home. Different people, different roles, different stories, but always the same outcome. The secretaries took it. The gardeners took it. The cooks, the drivers, the housekeepers. Some took it quickly, their hands moving before their thoughts could catch up. Others waited. A day, sometimes two, convincing themselves it didn't matter. Convincing themselves no one would notice. But in the end, they all took it. Every single one. And with each failure, Henry's belief hardened into something unshakable. People were predictable. Loyalty was temporary. And honesty had a price. All you had to do was wait long enough. This morning, the test was set again. The money lay scattered across the dresser, loose, visible, impossible to ignore. A careless display. Or, at least, that was how it was meant to look. Henry stepped back and studied the scene one last time. Then he moved silently behind the bedroom door, disappearing into the narrow shadow, where no one would see him. And he waited, not with curiosity, but with certainty, because he had seen this moment too many times before. The pause, the glance, the decision. It always ended the same way. Always. Downstairs, the front door opened. Soft footsteps entered the house. Measured, unhurried, unaware. The new cleaning employee had arrived. And for the first time in 15 years, something felt different. Henry Anderson did not become a billionaire by trusting people. He became one by studying them, by watching, by learning exactly how far a person could go once temptation was placed within reach. There was a time, years ago, when Henry believed in different things. Partnership, loyalty, even love. But those ideas did not survive the life he built. They were replaced one by one with evidence. His ex-wife was the first fracture. Linda Anderson had once stood beside him when the company was still small, when the money was uncertain, when the future depended on risk. She had called him her partner, her equal, her forever, until the day a man with more money and less patience walked into her life. She did not argue. She did not hesitate. She simply left. Clean, efficient, final. And Henry learned something important. Loyalty, he realized, was not permanent. It was conditional. And conditions could change. The second lesson came from business. A partner he had trusted, someone who had built deals with him from the ground up, quietly redirected funds into a separate account. It wasn't a large amount, not enough to destroy him, but enough to confirm what he was beginning to understand. Trust was always temporary. After that, the lessons came faster. Employees who smiled in his presence and stole in his absence. Assistants who managed his schedule and manipulated his accounts. Workers who called him sir and helped themselves when they thought no one was looking. Each incident was small on its own, but together they formed a pattern. And Henry Anderson believed in patterns, because patterns told the truth that people tried to hide. Over time, his belief became simple, clear, uncomplicated. Everyone has a price. Not immediately, not always in the same way, but given the right moment, given the right opportunity, everyone breaks. And that belief became something more than a thought. It became a system, a ritual, a test. Every new person who entered his home entered that system without knowing it. The rules were always the same, simple, invisible. He would leave money somewhere obvious, not hidden, not secured, just there. A stack of bills on a counter, an envelope on a table, loose cash on a dresser, careless, unprotected, tempting. Then he would wait. Sometimes he watched from another room, sometimes through cameras, sometimes from behind a door, just close enough to hear the silence shift. The results never changed. There was always a moment, a pause, a hesitation that stretched just long enough for a decision to form. And then the movement, a hand reaching, a glance over the shoulder, a quiet justification forming in the mind. No one will notice. It's not that much. I deserve this. And just like that, the test was complete. The money would disappear. Not all at once. Sometimes slowly. Sometimes carefully. But it always disappeared. And with it, another piece of Henry's belief was confirmed. By the time the 12th housekeeper had failed, he stopped expecting anything different. By the time the 15th did, he stopped feeling anything at all. It was no longer disappointment. It was confirmation. Proof of a system that worked exactly the way it was supposed to. People did not surprise him. They revealed themselves. Predictably. Consistently. Without exception. Until the morning Janet Santos walked into his life. She did not arrive with confidence. And she did not arrive with fear. She arrived the way someone does when they have learned to move carefully through the world. Quietly. Deliberately. Without drawing attention. Her uniform was clean, but worn at the edges. The fabric slightly faded from too many washes. Her shoes carried the weight of long days, the soles softened by time and distance. But her posture did not match her circumstances. Her back was straight, her movements controlled, and her eyes were not distracted. They were focused, observant, taking in everything without appearing to. Henry noticed that immediately. He opened the door himself. He did not always do that. But today, he wanted to see her, to measure her, before the test even began. Miss Santos, he said, his voice calm, neutral, controlled. I'm Henry Anderson. She nodded once. Good morning, sir. No hesitation. No unnecessary words. Just acknowledgement. She stepped inside, and for a brief moment she looked around. Not with wonder, not with envy, but with quiet attention, as if she were studying the space, not admiring it. The marble floors, the high ceilings, the sharp edges of expensive design. She saw it all, and then she moved on. That, too, Henry noticed. Most people lingered, even if only for a second. They looked longer than necessary. They imagined something, wanted something, but not her. He walked her through the house, room by room. His instructions were clear, measured, professional. General cleaning, 3 times a week. You'll begin upstairs. She listened, carefully, nodding only when necessary. I understand. No questions. No small talk. No attempt to impress. Just quiet efficiency. When they reached the staircase, she paused briefly. You have a beautiful home, she said. Her tone was even, respectful, but not emotional. Henry did not respond. He simply turned and walked away, because compliments like loyalty had never meant much to him. A few minutes later, he was alone again, upstairs, in his bedroom. The space was silent, still, waiting. Henry walked to the dresser and opened the top drawer. Inside a thick envelope, he took it out slowly, deliberately. $12,000. Counted. Prepared. He spread the bills across the surface. Not neatly, not carefully, but in a way that looked careless, natural, convincing. A few bills near the edge, some overlapping. The rest gathered loosely in the center. It looked like a mistake, and that was the point. He stepped back and studied it. Every detail, every angle, everything exactly where it needed to be. Then he moved, silently, to his position behind the bedroom door, the narrow space where he could see without being seen. He adjusted his stance, slowed his breathing, and waited. Downstairs, he could hear movement, the faint sound of supplies being set down, the soft rhythm of footsteps beginning their work. Steady, unhurried, unaware. Henry's gaze fixed on the dresser, on the money, on the moment that was coming, because it always came. The pause, the decision, the reveal. He had seen it 100 times before, and he was about to see it again. He stepped fully into the shadow behind the door, and waited for the moment he had seen 100 times before. The footsteps came slowly up the staircase, measured, even, unhurried. Henry stood perfectly still behind the bedroom door, his eyes fixed on the narrow gap between the frame and the wood aligned directly with the dresser, with the money. This was the moment, the one he knew better than any other. The moment when a person became predictable. The moment when they revealed themselves. The footsteps reached the top, paused, then moved again closer. A soft shift of weight outside the door. A hand on the handle. And then the door opened. Janet Santos stepped inside. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. She entered the room the way she had entered the house. Quietly, aware. She set her bag down beside the wall, reached inside, pulled out a cloth, prepared to begin. And then she saw it. The money. Her body stopped. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but completely, as if something invisible had pressed pause on the moment. The cloth remained in her hand, unmoved. Her eyes traced the surface of the dresser, the scattered bills, the careless arrangement, the quiet invitation. Behind the door, Henry leaned forward slightly. This was it, the pause. He had seen it before. Always this same stillness. The mind beginning to calculate. The moment stretching just enough for justification to take shape. He waited. Janet's breathing shifted. Barely noticeable, but different. Slower, deeper. Her fingers tightened slightly around the cloth. Then, relaxed. She took one step forward. Henry's jaw set. Another step. Closer now. Close enough to reach. Close enough to decide. His eyes narrowed. Focused. Certain. He knew what came next. He had always known. But then, something broke the rhythm. A small movement. A slight misstep. The cleaning bottle slipped from under her arm and dropped to the floor. The sound was sharp. Plastic against wood. Louder than it should have been. Janet flinched. Not at the money. At the noise. She bent down quickly. Picked up the bottle. Adjusted her grip. And for a brief second, she looked at nothing at all. Just space. Just breath. Then, she stood back up and looked at the dresser again. Henry did not move. Did not blink. Because something was different. Not wrong. Just different. Janet stepped closer. But not the way he expected. Not with urgency. Not with caution. With intention. She placed the cloth over her shoulder. Set the bottle carefully on the floor beside her. And then she reached for the money. Henry's chest tightened. There it was. The moment. The inevitable conclusion. But her hands did not close around the bills. They opened. Flat. Gentle. Careful. She gathered the scattered notes together. Not quickly. Not secretly. But with precision. She aligned the edges. Smoothed the corners. Separated the denominations. Hundreds with hundreds. 50s with 50s. Each movement deliberate. Each motion controlled. Henry's brow furrowed. This was not part of the pattern. This was not hesitation. This was not temptation. This was something else. Something he had never seen before. Janet continued, building a single, neat stack in the center of the dresser. Straight. Organized. Accounted for. When she finished, she did not step away. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small notepad, and a pen. Henry felt something shift. Subtle. Unfamiliar. She wrote quickly, calmly, tore the page cleanly, folded it once, placed it on top of the money, pressed it down gently, as if making sure it stayed. Then she stepped back, looked at her work, not with pride, not with relief, just completion. And then she whispered something, so soft it barely crossed the room. But Henry heard it. Thank you for honest work. He blinked. Once. Slowly. Because in 15 years, no one had ever said that. Not here. Not in this room. Not in front of that money. Janet picked up her bottle, unfolded her cloth, and began cleaning, as if nothing had happened. As if the test did not exist. As if the money had never been more than an object out of place. Henry remained behind the door. Long after she moved around the room. Long after the dresser was dusted. Long after the moment had passed. Because it had not passed. Not for him. Something had shifted, and he did not understand it. When she left the room, he stayed. Still. Silent. Looking at the dresser. At the money. At the folded note. Finally, he stepped forward. Walked slowly across the room. And picked it up. He unfolded it. Carefully. The handwriting was neat. Precise. Unhurried. $12,000 found on dresser. Organized and accounted for. A pause. Then a name. Janet Santos. Henry read it once. Then again, as if expecting the meaning to change. It did not. He placed the note back down, exactly where it had been. And for the first time in a long time, he did not feel certainty. He felt something else. Something unfamiliar. Something he could not immediately define. The second test came 3 weeks later. Not in the bedroom. In the kitchen. $8,000. Placed inside an open envelope. Left on the counter. In plain sight. This time, he did not hide behind a door. He watched from the hallway. Partially concealed. Close enough to see. Far enough not to be noticed. Janet entered. Set down her supplies. Began working. Same rhythm. Same pace. Left to right. Surface by surface. Nothing rushed. Nothing skipped. When she reached the envelope, she paused. Picked it up. Looked inside. Then placed it back down. No change in expression. No shift in breathing. No hesitation that suggested conflict. Only acknowledgement. She moved the envelope slightly. Wiped the surface beneath it. Then returned it to its original position. Before leaving the kitchen, she reached into her pocket. The same notepad. The same pen. A few quick lines. A folded page. Placed neatly on top. Henry waited until she was gone. Then stepped forward. Picked up the note. Read it. $8,000 in envelope found on kitchen counter. Moved to clean surface. Returned. Then, again, her name. Calm. Certain. Final. Henry stood there longer than necessary. Looking at the envelope. At the note. At the absence of everything he had expected. The third test came without planning. $5,000. Left in the laundry room. Partially hidden behind a bottle. Not obvious. But not invisible. A different kind of temptation. One that required discovery. She found it. Of course she did. She always saw what others missed. And once again, nothing changed. No hesitation. No internal conflict. Just the same sequence. Observe. Organize. Document. Leave. The fourth test. $15,000. Bathroom counter. Clear plastic bag. Impossible to ignore. Same result. The fifth. Loose bills scattered across the study floor. Messy. Disordered. Almost careless. She gathered them. Stacked them. Left a note. Every time. The same handwriting. The same tone. The same quiet certainty. And with each test, something inside Henry shifted. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. But steadily. Like a structure beginning to loosen at its foundation. Because patterns were supposed to hold. That was what made them useful. That was what made them true. But this was not holding. This was breaking. And he did not know how to fix it. Or explain it. Or ignore it. By the fifth test, he was no longer watching for the moment she would fail. He was no longer waiting for the familiar outcome. He was watching something else. Something quieter. Something harder to define. He was watching her. The way she moved. The way she worked. The way she existed in a space that was not hers, without ever taking more than she was given. And for the first time in years, Henry Anderson was not certain of anything. By the fifth test, he was no longer watching to catch her. He was watching to understand her. For a while the pattern held. Not the old pattern. The new one. Consistency. Precision. Quiet honesty that did not bend no matter the amount, no matter the opportunity. And that should have settled something inside Henry. It should have answered the question. Closed the loop. But it did not. Because certainty was something he understood. And this was not certainty. This was something else. Something unfinished. It started small. Almost invisible. The kind of detail most people would miss. But Henry did not miss details. He noticed the first time on a Tuesday. Janet finished earlier than expected. Not by much. Less than an hour. She packed her supplies. Moved through the house the same way she always did. Quiet. Efficient. Unnoticed. Then she left. No explanation. No adjustment to schedule. Nothing that demanded attention. And Henry told himself it meant nothing. because on its own, it did mean nothing. But then it happened again. Thursday. Same pattern. Same timing. Same quiet departure. And then, the following week. Tuesday. Again. A little early. A little too consistent. By the third occurrence, it was no longer coincidence. It was a pattern. And patterns always meant something. Henry sat in his office that afternoon, staring at nothing in particular, his fingers resting lightly on the edge of his desk, his mind doing what it always did, building connections, tracing behavior, looking for the break in the surface. Because there was always a break, always something beneath. And for the first time since Janet had entered his house, a different thought took shape. Not admiration, not curiosity, suspicion. Maybe she was not different. Maybe she was careful, patient, waiting. Maybe the honesty he had seen was not honesty at all. Maybe it was timing. The idea settled in slowly, not forced, not dramatic, just present. And once it was there, it did not leave. He turned to the monitor on his desk, pulled up the security feed, scrolled back. Tuesday, 2 weeks earlier. He watched her movements, room by room. Same pace, same attention, nothing out of place, until the time, 40 minutes early. She packed her things, left. No hesitation. Thursday, same. Tuesday again, same. No deviation, no visible reason, no explanation. Henry leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the screen, because this was familiar. This feeling, this shift, he had seen it before. The moment when something perfect revealed a flaw. Small, hidden, but enough. Enough to change everything. He told himself he was not disappointed. He told himself this was expected. This was reality correcting itself, returning to form. But something about it did not feel the same. Because the pattern before had been simple, obvious. This required effort, attention, time. And that made it worse. Because, if she was hiding something, she was doing it well, too well. The next Tuesday he was ready. He did not wait in his office. He did not watch through a screen. He listened, carefully, counting time without looking at a clock, measuring movement by sound, footsteps, drawers, water running, silence, and then, the shift, the subtle change in rhythm that signaled an ending. He stood before she reached the door. Already moving, already deciding. He picked up his keys, walked out without hesitation. By the time she stepped outside, he was already behind her. Not close, not obvious, but present, watching, following. The air outside was warm, the city alive with movement, cars passing, people talking, noise blending into something constant. Janet walked with purpose. Faster than she moved inside the house. Not rushed, but direct, as if she knew exactly where she needed to be. And time mattered. Henry kept his distance. Far enough not to be seen. Close enough not to lose her. He told himself this was necessary. That this was part of understanding. Part of confirming what he already knew. But beneath that, there was something else. Something less defined. Something that felt unfamiliar. She reached the bus stop, did not check her phone, did not look around. She simply waited, calm, still, present. The bus arrived. She stepped on. Henry hesitated, just for a second, because this was no longer observation. This was pursuit. Then he moved, boarded through the rear entrance, kept his head down, chose a seat 2 rows behind. The bus pulled away. And the distance between who he was and what he was doing became harder to ignore. The city changed as they moved. Gradually, subtly. The buildings became smaller, older, less polished. The streets narrowed. The pace shifted. Less noise. More weight. Janet sat near the window, her reflection faint against the glass. She did not fidget, did not check the time, did not show any sign of concern. Just quiet stillness, the kind that comes from routine, from repetition, from doing the same thing again and again until it becomes part of you. Henry watched her, not the way he had watched before, not looking for a mistake, looking for meaning, Something that would explain the pattern. Something that would confirm the suspicion. Or erase it. The bus slowed. Stopped. She stood. Moved toward the exit. Stepped down onto the pavement. Henry followed. The street was unfamiliar. Not a place he visited. Not a place he needed to visit. But she moved through it like she belonged. Turning corners without hesitation. Walking faster now. More urgency. More intention. He kept up. Careful not to close the distance too much. Careful not to lose her. One turn. Then another. Then she stopped. Just for a moment. In front of a building. Plain. Unremarkable. But not ordinary. There was something about it. Something in the stillness around the entrance. Something in the way people moved in and out. Quiet. Focused. Carrying something unseen. Janet stepped forward. Pushed through the doors. And disappeared inside. Henry slowed. His steps less certain now. His breath slightly heavier. Because something had shifted again. Not the pattern. Not the suspicion. Something deeper. Something he had not expected. He looked up at the building. At the sign above the entrance. And for the first time since he started following her, he felt something close to hesitation. Because this was not what he had imagined. Not even close. She stepped off the bus. And walked straight into a place he never expected. Henry stood outside the building for a moment longer than necessary. Not moving. Not deciding. Just looking. The glass doors opened and closed in slow intervals. People walked in. People walked out. None of them rushed. None of them lingered. There was a weight to the place. Quiet. Unspoken. The kind of silence that does not come from emptiness, but from something heavier. Something real. Henry stepped forward, pushed through the doors, and entered. The air inside was different. Clean. Sharp. Controlled. The scent of antiseptic and something beneath it, something harder to name. The lobby was busy, but not loud. Voices were lower. Movements more careful. Even the footsteps seemed softer, as if the building itself demanded it. Henry's eyes moved across the space, searching. Then he saw her, Janet, moving ahead, already halfway across the floor. She did not look back. She did not hesitate. She walked with familiarity, with direction, as if she had made this journey many times before. He followed, at a distance, past the reception desk, past rows of chairs filled with people waiting not impatiently, but quietly, past a hallway that stretched longer than it should have. Janet turned left, then right, then through a set of double doors. Henry slowed, just for a moment, because something inside him recognized this place. Not personally, but instinctively. The feeling of it, the weight. He pushed through the doors. The hallway beyond was quieter, narrower, the walls lighter, almost pale. The kind of space designed to hold something fragile, something uncertain. Janet moved ahead, then stopped. Outside a door. Room number 14. She placed her hand on the handle and paused. Not long. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But Henry noticed. Because it was the first time he had seen hesitation in her. Not the hesitation of temptation. Not the hesitation of uncertainty. Something else. Something deeper. She closed her eyes for a brief second, took a breath, and then she opened the door and stepped inside. Henry moved closer, slowly, carefully. He did not intend to stop at the door, but he did, because something inside that room held him there. Through the narrow gap, he could see part of it. A bed, white sheets, machines, soft lights blinking in quiet rhythm, and a child, small, too still, too thin. The kind of thin that does not come from time, but from something taking more than it gives. The boy's head was bare. No hair. His skin pale, almost translucent in the light. And his eyes, half open, tired. Janet was already beside him, sitting close, closer than she had ever stood to anything in Henry's house. Her posture different, her movements softer. She took his hands, both of them, held them gently, but firmly, and leaned in. She spoke, but her voice was low, too low for Henry to hear. But the tone was something he had never heard from her before. Warm, worn, alive. The boy turned his head slightly, said something, small, faint, and Janet smiled. Not the controlled expression she wore at work. Not the quiet politeness. This was different. This was real. A small laugh escaped her. Soft, careful, as if she did not want to disturb the moment. Then she reached up and touched his cheek, lightly, with the back of her fingers. And, this time, Henry heard her. "Mama is here." The words did not echo. They did not need to. They landed exactly where they were meant to. Henry stepped back. Just one step. Because something inside his chest shifted. Not suddenly. Not violently. But undeniably. A nurse entered the room. Knocked once. Stepped inside. Henry remained outside. Still. Listening. The nurse's voice was calm. Professional. Gentle. "Mrs. Santos, we still need to finalize the payment for the next treatment." A pause. Janet's voice followed. Steady. Controlled. "I understand. I will come by before I leave." No panic. No pleading. Just acknowledgement. The nurse spoke again. Soft reassurance. Then footsteps. The door opened. Closed. Silence returned. Henry did not move. Because now everything was different. The early departures. The quiet urgency. The absence of distraction. The discipline. The precision. It was no longer a mystery. It was necessity. Every movement. Every decision. Every moment of restraint. It had never been about the money. Not really. It had been about something else. Something far heavier. Far more expensive. Time. Life. Survival. He looked at the door again. At the space where she had disappeared inside. And for the first time, the pattern he had built over 15 years did not apply. Because this situation did not fit inside it. Not even close. He thought about the money. All of it. The thousands placed in front of her. The opportunities. The ease with which she could have taken even a small portion. No one would have known. No one would have questioned it. And yet, she had not taken a single bill. Not one. Even when she needed it. Even when the cost of not taking it was this. Henry's hand rested lightly against the wall. His fingers pressing into the surface, as if grounding himself. Because something was breaking. Not around him. Inside him. The belief. The certainty. The structure he had built piece by piece over years. It had always been solid. Reliable. Proven. Until now. Because now there was evidence against it. Not theoretical. Not imagined. Real. Standing behind a hospital door. Holding the hands of a child who needed more than she had. And still choosing not to take what was never hers. Not because she couldn't, but because she wouldn't. Henry exhaled slowly, the sound almost silent, because the realization was unavoidable now. Her discipline was not restraint. It was survival. Her honesty was not a decision. It was identity. Her silence was not distance. It was dignity. And suddenly, everything he thought he understood about people felt incomplete, flawed, insufficient. He remained there for a long time. Long enough for the light in the hallway to shift. Long enough for footsteps to pass. Long enough for the weight of the moment to settle fully. And when he finally stepped away from that door, he was not the same man who had followed her there. Because something fundamental had changed. Something he could not ignore, could not explain, could not undo. For the first time in years, Henry Anderson did not have an answer. For the first time in years, he did not have a pattern to rely on. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to believe anymore. Janet saw him the moment she stepped out of the room. She did not flinch. She did not step back. But something in her expression changed. Not guilt. Not fear of being caught. Something quieter. Something protective. "Mr. Anderson." Her voice was steady, but softer than before. Henry opened his mouth, then closed it again, because for once, he did not have the right words. "I was nearby," he said. The sentence felt incomplete the moment it left him. Janet held his gaze for a brief second. Not challenging, not questioning, just acknowledging. Then she nodded. "I see." Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, but heavy. because both of them understood something had shifted. "Can we talk?" Henry said. She hesitated. Only for a moment. Then nodded again. "There is a small place across the street." They walked together. Not side by side, but not apart either. The distance between them measured. Deliberate. The cafe was simple. Quiet. A few tables. Low conversation in the background. Nothing that demanded attention. Henry sat across from her, hands folded on the table, waiting. Janet held a cup of tea, not drinking it, just holding it, as if the warmth mattered more than the taste. "How long?" Henry asked. She did not look up immediately. 8 months, she said. A pause. Then clarity. "Leukemia." The word landed without emphasis, as if it had been spoken too many times to carry shock anymore. Henry nodded once. "He is 7, she continued. "His name is Gabriel." Another pause. "My husband died 3 years ago." Her voice did not break. It did not change, but something underneath it shifted. Construction accident. Henry said nothing, because there was nothing to say that would not reduce what she had already lived through. "The treatment is expensive," he said carefully. Janet gave a small nod. "Insurance covers some." Another pause. "Not enough." Henry leaned back slightly, processing, calculating, not numbers, but weight. "How do you manage?" he asked. She finally looked at him. Direct. Steady. "I work. Simple. Uncomplicated. Final. I take extra shifts. Weekends. Evenings." A small breath. "I sold what I could." She looked back down at the tea. "I do what is necessary." Henry's eyes lowered briefly, then returned. "Why didn't you tell me?" It was not an accusation. It was confusion. Janet's expression changed. Not defensive, but firm. "Tell you what." He held her gaze. "That I need help." She shook her head slowly. "I do my job in your house." Her voice remained calm, controlled. "My life is not part of that agreement." "You could have asked for more hours," Henry said. "Or in advance." Janet's fingers tightened slightly around the cup. Not anger. Not quite. Something stronger. "I do not ask for mercy." The words were quiet, but they carried weight. She met his eyes again. Not from employers. A pause. Not from anyone. The cafe seemed to fade around them. The noise lowering. The space narrowing. Because everything that mattered was happening at that table. "My mother raised me to stand on my own," she continued. "I know how people look at me when they find out." Her voice softened just slightly. "They change." A brief silence. "They begin to pity." She exhaled slowly. "And pity is heavy." Henry did not move, did not interrupt. "Because once you accept it," she said, "you start to depend on it." Her eyes held his now. Steady. Unwavering. "And if I start asking for mercy?" A pause. Small, but absolute. "I may forget how to stand." The words settled between them. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. Henry felt something shift again. Deeper this time. Not confusion. Not uncertainty. Something closer to collapse. Because everything he believed about people, everything he had proven, tested, confirmed, did not account for this. Did not explain her. He looked at his hands. At the stillness of them. At the difference between what he had and what she carried. Then he spoke. "I want to help." Janet did not respond immediately. Her expression did not change. Not hopeful. Not relieved. Careful. Measured. "I am not offering out of pity," he continued. His voice lower now. More deliberate. "I am offering because I can." A pause. "And because it is the right thing to do." The words felt unfamiliar, but true. Janet watched him. Long enough to understand he meant them. Long enough to measure the weight behind them. "I would repay it," she said quietly. Henry shook his head slightly. "That is not necessary." "It is to me." The answer came without hesitation, without negotiation. Henry nodded once, accepting, because this was not about money. Not for her. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Janet spoke again. "He likes dinosaurs." Henry looked up. Gabriel. A faint shift in her expression. "He had books." A pause. "I sold most of them." Her voice did not break, but something behind it did. He still talks about them. Henry said nothing, but something inside him moved. Something that had been still for a very long time. And, in that moment, the decision was no longer complicated, no longer theoretical. It was clear. And for the first time in his life, he meant it when he said he wanted to help. That night, Henry did not return to his routine. He did not open his laptop. He did not review reports. He did not calculate outcomes. Instead, he sat alone, in silence, at the same table where he had once believed everything made sense. His mind moved differently now, not searching for patterns, not confirming assumptions, revisiting, replaying, reconsidering. 15 years of certainty, built carefully, piece by piece, each test, each failure, each moment that had reinforced the same conclusion. Everyone has a price. The phrase had guided him, defined him, protected him. And now, it felt incomplete. He thought about the money, all of it, every test, every opportunity placed in front of someone, every moment he had waited for the same result. And then he thought about her, Janet, the way she had stood in that room, the way she had touched the money without taking it, the way she had written notes as if honesty required documentation, not for him, but for herself. He thought about the hospital, the child, the weight she carried without asking anyone to share it. And slowly, something inside him shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but permanently. The next morning, Henry made a call. Not through assistance, not through layers. Direct, clear. He arranged everything, quietly. The payments, the treatment, handled in a way that would not trace back to him. No name, no recognition, no obligation. Because help without dignity was not help at all. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing changed on the surface. Janet continued her work. The same way, the same pace, the same attention to detail. If she noticed anything different, she did not show it. And Henry did not ask. Because some things did not need acknowledgement. They returned to the house. The same rooms, the same routines. But something fundamental had changed. One afternoon, Henry stood in his bedroom again, in front of the dresser, the same place where it had all begun. He opened the drawer, looked at the money inside, and paused. For a long moment, he said nothing, did nothing. Then he took the envelope, placed it on the dresser, not scattered, not arranged to tempt, just placed, plain, neutral, no trap, no test, no hidden intention. He stepped back. Not into the shadows, but into the open. And when Janet entered the room, he did not hide. He did not watch. He simply allowed the moment to exist, without control, without expectation, without judgment, because he no longer needed proof. He no longer needed confirmation. He understood now. Not everyone was waiting for the right opportunity to fail. Some people had already decided who they were, long before the test appeared. And nothing, not even desperation, would change that. Henry turned away from the dresser, walked toward the door, and left the room. Not because the test was over, but because it was no longer necessary. And for the first time in years, he was not watching people to catch them. He was watching them to understand them. For 15 years, he had been searching for proof that people were dishonest. And all along, he had been blind to the quiet ones who never were.